everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Lower drug costs now. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. As we know, for years, seniors and families across America have struggled under the skyrocketing cost of prescription drugs they need to stay healthy, but also the cost of drugs threatening their financial health and well-being as well. Always said in our meetings that when you travel the country, the issue of the cost of prescription drugs is one subject that can make grown men cry. Just cry about not being able to deal with those costs, what it means, again, to the health and well-being of their families because of cost. The burden of out-of-control prescriptions comes to an issue that touches every family in America. That was self-evident in the election of 2018. It's still a big issue as we go forward. We don't want a political issue at the polls. We want a solution in the Congress, and we want it now. On health committees of jurisdiction, under our outstanding chairman, Energy and Commerce Chairman Frank Pallone, Mr. Neal, Richie Neal, Chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and Chairman Bobby Scott. I want to thank them for their leadership and the hard work of their staffs to bring us where we are today. In the interest of time, because these committee chairs have hearings they have to go to, I'll save some of my remarks for later. Right now, I'm going to yield to the distinguished Democratic leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would stay longer, but I'm going to testify on D.C. statehood, a critically important issue for us. We want a strong majority in the House because we campaign on a promise to tackle the issues Americans care most about. This is one of those issues. One of the most pressing challenges facing our country and working families is the rising costs of prescription drugs. Drug prices clearly are out of control. We've all heard the horror stories of families having to choose between paying for necessary medications like insulin or paying the mortgage, the rent, or putting food on the table. In my home state of Maryland, the list price for insulin is 21 times that of Australia, 14 times the price in the United Kingdom, and 12 times the cost in Canada. Uninsured people living in my district, 6 times more for an EpiPen than uninsured, not unemployed. 6 times for an EpiPen more than Australians pay, and 9 times more the cost in Great Britain. That is just unsustainable, unacceptable. American taxpayers support prescription drug innovation through government grants and R&D tax credits to drug companies, so Americans shouldn't have to pay many times more what people in other countries pay. Something needs to be done, and Democrats are determined to get the job done. We promised we would do it, and we're going to do it. There's plenty of room to secure fair prices and protect innovations. That's why today we're unveiling H.R. 3 that will help lower prescription drug prices and hold drug companies accountable. H.R. 3 will now advance to committee consideration. We have the 3 chairs here with us, a chance to make improvements in that legislation, to hear from people as to their views as how this best can be done. I look forward to seeing the progress made there with the goal of bringing a marked-up bill to the floor that addresses this challenge with the seriousness it deserves. The time is now, and I thank the Speaker for her leadership and these 3 committee chairs and their members for their leadership, and look forward to being supportive of their product. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Stenny, for your very kind introduction.
Well, of all introductions you have, now what you have to say is of all the introductions I have had, yours is the most recent.
Ladies and gentlemen, the distinguished on the Education and Labor Committee, my friend from Purdue.
Thank you, and thank you, Stenny, for your leadership, and Speaker Pelosi, thank you for your leadership on this issue. As Stenny indicated, I chair the Education and Labor Committee, and one of the important aspects of this is what the plan does for employer-based health care plans. Employer-based plans spend about $84 billion every year on drugs, and the top 10 drugs cost about $14 billion a year. H.R. 3 addresses this problem by allowing working families and employer-sponsored plans to access the same savings that will be negotiated for Medicare. As a result, this bill will reduce the cost of prescriptive drugs for workers and free up money for companies to invest in creating new jobs and economic growth across the country. This bill is good for taxpayers, good for workers, and good for the economy. I want to thank the Speaker and all of my colleagues for their leadership in advancing this ambitious proposal to address skyrocketing drug prices. And now I'm proud to yield the floor to the distinguished chair of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, Chairman Frank Pallone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. I got an introduction. Thank you. Let me just say that I'm really excited today because what we're doing can really help the average American. And I want to thank Nancy in particular, because I think she's always looking out to see what we can do, not only as Democrats, but as members of Congress, to really make a difference to help people in their daily lives. And this is really something that does that. Steny mentioned how drug prices are out of control, and that is really true. I really want to stress that the status quo is simply unacceptable. Something needs to be done, and we're going to do it. The problem right now is that the drug companies basically charge whatever they want, and unless a drug has generic competition, which obviously we encourage, then they basically do what they want and they have a monopoly. On the other hand, in many other countries, that's not the case. Most developed countries actually have their government negotiating prices on behalf of their constituents, and as a result, the prices are a lot less in most of the other developed countries of the world. And so what we do is we subsidize the other countries, which is wrong. We need to give the authority to the government, in this case, the Department of Health and Human Services, to negotiate prices. They're specifically forbidden to do that when Medicaid Part D was created, and now we're going to reverse that and put in place a mechanism to achieve real price reductions. So what do? Well, first of all, the Health and Human Services Secretary has to identify the 205 most expensive, if you will, drugs for which there is no competition, no generic competition, and then on an annual basis negotiate for at least 25, and that's a floor, at least 25. And also insulin, which is not part of the 25, but also has to be negotiated. And that negotiation has to prioritize the drugs that will create the greatest savings for taxpayers. The top 25 drugs right now make up about 23% of the spending on prescription drugs, so this really makes a difference. Now, we do have to make sure that the negotiations produce significantly lower drug prices. We say that the maximum price that can be set is 1.2 times the international average market price, which is basically the price if you average some of these other countries that actually negotiate prices. This is going to mean real savings to the average American. I just wanted to give a couple of examples. For example, Lantus, an insulin drug for diabetes, costs almost 4 times more in the U.S. than in Canada, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Australia. Dulera, a drug to control asthma, costs over 3 times here as it does in Canada. And Lucentis, a macular degeneration drug, costs 7 times more here than in France. And it's just not fair. I mean, we want to level the playing field so that the American people, have a real shot at, having some lower prices that'll make a difference in their lives. So we promised this as part of our Better Deal last November. This is a better deal. Energy and Commerce will have a hearing next Wednesday in the Health Subcommittee to begin the process in our committee. And now I want to introduce Richie Neal. I want you to know that all 3 of us, Bobby, Richie Neal, and myself, we're working together on this. This is going to be a joint effort with the Speaker and with the leadership. And we find that we're very much on board together in making sure this is a united front. Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Frank. This is a moment when I think fact and policy and opinion are wed. And this conversation's gone on for a long period of time. in America. And we've heard time and again from our constituents that they believe that they are paying unfairly high-priced prescription drug costs. And that is a fact. So we hear these stories all of the time from senior citizens, particularly, but we hear from other consumers as well about what they have to budget for these out-of-pocket costs. So today, we are proposing negotiation. We obviously are going to include the Secretary of HHS, but there's also another important consideration here in this legislation, and that is we build in compliance, we build in escalator clauses, so there is room here for the conversation to be pursued based upon the proposal that we are offering today. If the companies conform to the legislative intent that we are offering here today, then they would not have to be fearful of compliance cost assessments or the escalator clauses that are built in. But we rely heavily upon the idea that for the first time, that many of these issues, in fact, ought to be negotiated. This is not limited, incidentally, to the members that are standing on the dais. I've had conversations with members on the other side. They think this is a time or an idea whose time has come. In addition, a year ago, the Ways and Means staffers, we met with the Secretary, and he, while not embracing anything specific, was very sympathetic to the arguments that we were making. Again, the idea here is that opinion eventually plays out, but you need substantive legislation to make sure that the intent of what we are going to do with this proposal really benefits the American consumer. And I think that based upon the opportunity that we'll do through markups, we'll be able to clarify many of these positions. But I think Frank and the Speaker have outlined clearly our intent. So it's, I think, very helpful to the national conversation. We did indicate we would tackle this issue, and that is fully what our witness here today intends to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now I want to yield to not only a member of our leadership, Assistant Speaker Ben Ray Lujan, but a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee as well.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and for the leadership of bringing us together yet again. So here we are, months into the new Congress, after we've had an incredible agenda that's been laid out by Speaker Pelosi, but one that was supported by the American people. And H.R. 3 delivers on another commitment made by so many of our colleagues as they earn the trust and support of voters all across the country to lower prescription drug prices. That's what this bill will do. We're finally getting to a day where we will require the negotiation of prescription drug prices with Medicare, but then taking those savings and being able to apply them so we can expand coverage for seniors all across America to be able to get additional care, additional support, while lowering the costs for people across the country as they're having those conversations around the kitchen table about what matters most. And so again, I'm proud to be here today just as a reminder of the work that we did in 2018. We flipped so many seats across the country. We exceeded expectations on the number of seats that we would pick up because the American people wanted to bring about the positive change, including lowering prescription drug prices. That's the legislation we have before us today. We're eager to get to work to deliver this, and I thank the Speaker for her leadership on bringing us to this day.
Thank you very much, and thank you for delivering that message of for the people agenda, lower health care costs by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. People say, how come health care and that issue were so much a part of the 2018 discussion? Well, this is because it's what matters to the American people. And we had 10,000 events. There were 10,000 events across the country of people telling their stories about what the cost of prescription drugs was doing to their health and financial health, but also protecting the benefit, the pre-existing condition benefit, which is legislation we have already sent over to Mitch McConnell. So here we are with this legislation, and just to review, it ends the ban. Imagine that there's a ban for the Secretary to negotiate for lower drug prices for Medicare. But as has been indicated by our distinguished chairman and members of the leadership, that will apply to all. Makes lower drug prices negotiated by Medicare available to all Americans. It stops drug companies from ripping off Americans while charging other countries less for the drug. Let me go into that for a moment because it has been alluded to by our speakers. The countries that we would take an average, some say we should do the mean rather than the average. That's up to the committees to decide. But it's Australia, Japan, Canada, the UK, France, and Germany. The mean or the average of the cost there. Sometimes it has been indicated 6-to-1, sometimes it might be 3-to-1. Depending on that, we have a formulation that it's 1.2 times what that mean or average is in those countries. So this is a big drop in cost for the U.S. $2,000 cap, for some there is no cap, and the Grassley bill is $3,100 cap. Our bill is better in that respect and in many other respects, but we look forward to working in a bipartisan, bicameral way on this. And it reinvests. There will be enormous savings. We're waiting for the CBO report to come. There'll be enormous savings springing from this, and the committees of jurisdiction will be working on how those allocations will be, that money will be used, whether it's improved benefits for Medicare, hearing, visual, dental, et cetera, whether it's about giving more resources to the Secretary's office so that more drugs can be negotiated. In other words, we're saying 25 as a floor. We'd like it to be the highest number possible of the highest cost drugs that make the biggest difference, those drugs without competition. So it is transformative. So it's a good day, and we think that the choices that were made by the members of the committee, and I commend the chairman and their members and their staffs for the work that they have done, my staff as well, to try to get the most effective way to get the job done. And we do think that there could be very strong bipartisan support for this legislation. We'll take any questions on this subject. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, do you want and expect White House buy-in on this plan, and how closely did you consult with them in developing it?
Well, yes, we do hope to have White House buy-in because that seems to be the route to getting any votes in the United States Senate. And certainly we want as strong a bipartisan vote as we can in the House and the Senate. So we would hope that they would support this. They may have some other suggestions, and that's what the committee process is about.
In the President's State of the Union address. In the President's State of the Union address, he aggressively raised this question in front of the American people. And time and again, when talking to members of the administration, they seem intent on pursuing the same, I think, legitimate path that we're currently on.
And in my conversations with the president, there are two subjects on which we think we can have, of the three items on our agenda, the For the People agenda, lower the cost of prescription drugs by lowering cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs, bigger paychecks by building the infrastructure of America, and cleaner government. On the first two, I think we can have their cooperation, not the third. But on building the infrastructure, that's another area where we think we can find common ground. So my conversations with the president have been about making this a priority. I believe that he considers it so, and that we can work together. On the subject, yes, sir.
Yeah. On the three pillars you just laid out, on the cleaner government one, the president has suggested many times that what he describes as presidential harassment will hold up
Excuse me, I'm sorry. That is not on
progress
this subject. Okay,
Well,
we're talking about prescription
He
drugs
just
right
said
now.
that it will hold up progress on things like prescription drugs and infrastructure.
Well, but instead, in fact, it is a source of hope to the American people that if we reduce the role of big, dark money in politics, we'll be able to get gun violence protection bills passed, climate action now, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. On this subject, sir? Yes.
The Energy and Commerce
And then, and weigh
Committee-
in any time, my comment.
Energy and Commerce Committee Republicans have already criticized the plan, saying they offered a bipartisan solution. This is not one of them. This is one of your radical socialist ideas. How do you respond to that?
You want me to respond?
Please.
I'll give you a quick answer.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, every time we do something that's a social program that would actually help the American people, somehow social becomes socialist. I'm not sure I understand that. I mean, look, the president and most Republicans say they want to lower the cost of prescription drugs. They may disagree on how we do it, but I think, as the speaker said, as we go through the committee process, we have to convince them that this is a way to do it. And, you know, I'm not going to get into the ideology of labels and all that, but I do think that we can get Republican support. And of course, as the speaker said, the president is very much the key. If he indicates support, or at least suggests it's a good idea that should be pursued, then hopefully we can get some of the energy and commerce Republicans to go along.
Yeah, one of the things that institutional memory does, I think it helps frame an argument. So recall when Medicare Part D was offered, a key member on the other side in the run-up said negotiating drug prices through Medicare was un-American. I mean, anybody who follows the forces of the marketplace, competition and negotiation, what gives us better products and lower costs.
Yes, sir.
The Progressive Caucus doesn't like the floor of 25 drugs. They want more than 25 drugs as a minimum. Are you open to changing
Yes,
that?
indeed. Well, we'll just see what it's really more about the absorptive capacity to be able to produce a result. That we want to be able to indicate a result that is possible and doable. As I said earlier, if there are more resources, if the secretary said I can do more, if I have more resources, then we should make that available. But that's an open point, and we've had that discussion. First, they thought 25 was all we were going to do. No, at least 250, and it could be many more, depending on what innovation brings to the marketplace. Many new drugs may come, and so this may be an ongoing process. But I will say that the American people need this. So we want to get a result, and we're going to work together to get the best possible, strongest possible result for them. The American people also believe that what we do at the National Institutes of Health with the taxpayer dollar to invest in basic biomedical research is the foundation for how most private sector research goes forward. It's what happens at the NIH and the grants that they give out extramurally, grants into universities and other entities throughout the country. That is taxpayer funded, publicly funded. Everyone in America should have access to the benefits of that research. So, you know, I want the biggest number we can possibly get, but I don't want to promise something that we won't have a deliverable within the next year on. So, again, the committee will decide how to use the additional funding, and one of it may be to endorse. If that's the answer, to increase the absorptive capacity of the Secretary's office to do those. But thank you for your question. On this subject, yes, ma'am.
Another point that progressives have raised is they want to see something in the bill that addresses drugs that are coming on market at
Yes,
high prices.
of course.
Is there something in this bill that would ensure that drugs don't come to market?
If there is no international price, which is often the case with a new drug, then we say that that in the negotiation, the secretary shall ensure that he or she receives at least a 15% discount off of the price of the drug when negotiating. So there is anticipation. Now, keep in mind that, you know, whether or not some new drug that comes to market is likely to be in that 25, you know, where we're spending the most, is probably not likely, but if it is, then we would at least have the requirement of 15% reduction or discount.
On 15%, that's 15% lower than what, and doesn't that create the incentive to raise the overall price or the introductory price?
Well, look, you can, you know, I've heard all kinds of people say how the drug companies are going to find a way to get around this. You know, someone suggested, well, they'll just raise prices in the 6 countries we're using for the international price. But I mean, you know, we're doing our best to make this so that it is going to save money. And I'm sure, if, you know, somebody's going to try to figure out a way around it. But, you know, then we'll just have to deal with that. But right now, go ahead, Rich.
No, and one of the things that I would like to do, I've addressed this with the speaker, we unanimously passed the STAR Act out of the Ways and Means Committee. We'd like to include the STAR Act, that, as you know, the STAR Act was devoted to transparency.
And there's another bill in the Energy and Commerce Committee, Jan Schakowsky's bill, that is about transparency. So this is what is going on to be a basis for discussion, but there'll be many thoughts that enter into it that are very positive, and transparency is a central issue. But we wanted the versions that emerge there to be springing from, again, the members of the committees who have been working on these bills for a long time. And I would just also like to say that the point that you make is we cannot have the non-compliance fee be the cost of doing business. It has to be an incentive not to go down that path. And therefore, in relationship to what's happening overseas, if it's 5 times what we pay, if it's 2 times what we pay, the non-compliance penalty, if they do not go down this path, is something that would be very painful to the drug companies for not coming through. But understand this.
Severe. It's severe. Did we actually mention the enforcement mechanism?
No, we didn't, but there is a strong enforcement
strong.
mechanism in the
Six-
legislation.
For compliance, it's like 65% of the gross sales if they don't negotiate, and then depending how long they can refuse.
There's an
to ne-
escalator clause.
It goes all the way up
escalates.
to the 90s.
95. So I mean, that's pretty severe.
Yeah, goes up to the 90s. But again, this is an introduction. So much more will be added in the committee process and the public review of it. But we are very excited about and happy that we can give some hope to people that help is on the way when it comes to addressing meeting the needs of their families, the family's health, the family's financial health, family's well-being. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned Jan Schakowsky and transparency. What about the idea of reducing the period before biologics can have competition lower than 12 years?
Yeah.
Is that part of this conversation?
It's not part of this conversation, but it's part of the conversation that we're having on the U.S.-Mexico, the USMCA.
That was part of TPP, Madam
If you
Speaker.
can-
No, that conversation is taking place right now, and I think it's fair to say we're making headway on it.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, sir.
What is your timetable for markups and going to the floor? Would you engage with the White House trying to seek a deal before you go to the floor? And if there's no deal after a certain time, would you go to the floor anyway?
Well, I just will say this, in a conversation I've had with Senator Grassley about this, he seems intent on proceeding with parallel legislation. And he pointed out that in his legislation that he had some Republican help, but a lot of Democratic help, and I think that that would be a good pace setter for all of us. But certainly any ideas that they would have, and the Secretary passing on those ideas, I think would be helpful to the conversation. But I think we would like to jumpstart the markup in October.
Yeah, so as I said, Energy and Commerce, we're going to have a hearing in the subcommittee next Wednesday. So we want to do this as quickly as possible.
And I thank the chairman as well as Chairman Bobby Scott for the work that they have done, the experience and knowledge. This is always complicated, the knowledge that they bring to make the decisions that will make the biggest difference. And we don't call it a deal, but hopefully we can come to some agreement about what is best for the American people. I'm optimistic. I see everything as an opportunity. As sad as it is that we're in this situation in terms of the cost of prescription drugs, it is an opportunity for us to go forward. And the bright light that will be shown on this is important, and including the transparency provisions that will be in the bill one way or another. We have a couple of different approaches to it. But this is, again, a new day when it comes to the lowering drug costs now. On this subject?
Republicans, particularly in the Senate, have made it clear that government negotiations is a non-starter for them, but there is a lot of overlap in your bill with other aspects of the Grassley bipartisan drug pricing plan that cleared Senate Finance Committee. Is there a path forward for you guys to sort of drop the negotiations
No.
aspect, but work
Absolutely, positively not. When we first ran in 05 to win in 06, our agenda was 6 for 06, a new direction for America, 6 for 06. 5 of the bills became the law of the land, 1 did not, enabling the secretary to negotiate for lower prices. If we only could have done it then. That is the central point. As you repeat what you said earlier about Medicare Part D, what they said about negotiating.
Well, that was it. I mean, and that's, you can go back and trace that. It was a subcommittee chair, I think from Florida at the time, and he said that negotiating Medicare drug costs, the biggest purchaser where they have their own audience to set the price with on their own, he said that in that instance, it would be un-American to negotiate drug costs? I mean, that runs against the orthodoxy. I can't imagine those words coming out of Ronald Reagan's mouth.
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Let me excuse our distinguished guest then. You're welcome to stay, but I know. We have time for 3 questions briefly because the room. Yes.
How closely are you following the situation with this intelligence whistleblower? And what's your reaction to the reporting that it has to do with a promise the president made to a foreign leader?
Well, I obviously trust the judgment of our committee chair, Adam Schiff, and he's following this very closely with an expert eye on what the law is, what protections there are for whistleblowers, and where does it cross a line of a conversation that the president may have or commitment he may make for our nation that the public should be aware of.
Madam Speaker.
And they're having meetings right now as we speak.
Madam Speaker.
Yes, ma'am.
This week, Corey Lewandoski came before the House Judiciary Committee. Do you think that that hearing was a distraction from the House Democratic agenda, like lowering drug pricing?
I think that what we're doing, we are legislating, investigating, and litigating. And I trust the work of the committees as they go forward to do that. Yes, sir.
Was that hearing an investigation, though? I mean, it was full of fireworks. It was very partisan.
You understand that? I answered. I trust the committee and the path that they are on. Yes, ma'am.
On guns, I know you spoke with the president over the weekend. I know I asked you on Tuesday
Yeah.
night if you heard any more. I guess first of all,
Yeah.
you haven't heard any more since then. And
No.
do you believe that the problem here is that the president doesn't know what he supports? You know, Mitch McConnell keeps saying, "I'll move something if we can get, clearance from the White House." That obviously hasn't happened. What is, having spoken with the president, what is your read on what?
We're talking guns now, gun safety now. Let me just say that Leader McConnell says that about every subject, whether we're talking about the CR, which we were very happy to file last night so that we can take it up today. And we understand that the Senate will be accepting the CR that we send over there, whether it's about negotiating the what comes next in terms of appropriations to continue to keep government open. Whatever the subject, the leader will just say, "I'm just waiting to hear what the president wants." Now, that is to abdicate your role as a leader in the Article 1 first branch of government. Yes, we all want to work together to have the most sustainability for what we do, and the president's signature is an important part of that. But to say we won't even make a suggestion, that we will not represent, we are representatives, and so are the senators, the point of view of 90% of the American people support H.R. 8 background checks, responsible background check legislation. So the president says he wants to do it. Let's hope that he does. We've heard through staff that they're still working on it. He's going to call us when he's ready, but we haven't heard directly from the president.
Having spoken with him, though, what do you think he's wrestling with? Obviously,
You want me to tell you what goes on in the president's
but you spoke
mind?
to him. I mean, without giving up state secrets here, characterize the conversation.
I did that already. Chuck and I characterized it. We had a conversation, which, it being a Sunday morning, I told the president, as always, I pray for him. I pray for him, and I pray for his safety and the safety of his families. And I pray that he will open his heart to the safety of America's families as well by giving his approval, his imprimatur on H.R. 8, background check legislation, which is supported by 90% of the American people, Democrats and Republicans, independents, gun owners, NRA members, veterans, collectors, hunters, and the rest. So I don't know what's holding the president up on it. I know he's busy, and we hope to hear from him soon. But what I will say to the people I work with and the grassroots movement, it's not just about guns. It's about the Grim Reaper saying he's going to stop all legislation that goes over there. So I say to them, if you care about gun safety and saving the lives of our children, call Mitch McConnell. If you care about raising the minimum wage, call Mitch McConnell. If you care for equal pay for equal rights, call Mitch McConnell. If you call about net neutrality, as young people do, call Mitch McConnell. If you call about climate action now, call Mitch McConnell. If you call about, did I say violence against women? call Mitch McConnell. The list goes on and on. If you care about our dreamers, call Mitch McConnell, because he's holding up so much legislation that were our top 10 priorities, which have bipartisan support in the public. They weren't looking for a fight, we're looking for a result, A. And we sent over many other pieces of legislation that pertain to lowering the cost of health care in our country. Call Mitch McConnell. The list goes on and on. So this not even obstruction, it's just abandonment of your responsibility as a leader in the Senate of the United States. One more. Yes, ma'am.
One more on the H.R. 8. The Attorney General floated a proposal in the Senate yesterday that did not include H.R. 8. It included the Manchin-Toomey bill, or it looked like the Manchin-Toomey bill, and that would not cover private sales. And I'm
That's
wondering,
right.
if that is the route that the President and the Senate go, would that be amenable to you in the House?
We're for H.R. 8. It was very carefully constructed legislation that will save lives. One of the recent mass murders was by somebody who had a straw purchase. That means I can't pass the test, you can. You buy the gun, I buy it from you. That is a dangerous dynamic to have. So we're for H.R. 8. The administration did not embrace what was said in the Senate. They disassociated themselves from it.
Likely to go beyond it. H.R. 8 is
Well, you know
important.
what? Public sentiment may weigh in, but we must make progress on this. And I told the president, in friendship, for the children, we're not going away. We're not going away until we have background checks to save lives of the American people. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Lower drug costs now.